For millions of years, there was something that dominated the oceans. A predator so lethal that nothing seemed able to stop it. The Mosasaurus didn't just hunt, it controlled everything that moved under the water. It could exceed 12 to 15 meters in length, a size comparable to a bus. With a body built for ramming and a jaw capable of overpowering almost any creature in its environment. But even at the top, there is something that always lurks, because it wasn't alone. And what shared its world could not only face it, some were even worse than him. And one of the first didn't look like a threat. In the seas of the late Cretaceous, not everything that shared the ocean with the Mosasaurus represented an obvious threat. Some creatures, in fact, seemed to move slowly, almost out of sync with the great predators. But that impression could be deceptive. One of them was the Elasmosaurus. It could reach between 10 and 14 meters in length, a figure comparable to many mosasaurs. But its structure was completely different. While the Mosasaurus concentrated its mass in a powerful body, with jaws designed to crush bone, the Elasmosaurus distributed much of its length into a neck that could exceed 6 or even 7 meters. It wasn't built to chase, but it wasn't built to be easily caught either. That neck allowed it to attack or inspect from a distance, keeping its body out of a predator's immediate range. And in close encounters, that difference mattered. Because the Mosasaurus depended on a direct charge, it needed to close the distance, and the Elasmosaurus didn't. Both shared the same territory and competed for the same prey: fish, cephalopods, and other marine reptiles. That placed them in constant conflict, even without direct confrontations. It wasn't an enemy due to superiority. It was an enemy due to inevitable interaction. Because in an ocean where every movement meant energy, risk, and exposure, interfering with the hunt of a predator like the Mosasaurus was already enough. And in those kinds of encounters, the strongest didn't always win, but rather the one that managed to stay out of reach for 1 second more. But not everything in that ocean depended on keeping your distance. There were creatures that didn't avoid risk. They used it to their advantage. They attacked first. In the same ocean where the Mosasaurus dominated, there were predators that didn't need to impose themselves through sheer strength. Some simply waited. One of them was the Cretoxyrhina, a shark from the late Cretaceous that could reach between 6 and 8 meters in length, with a body designed for constant speed and precise maneuvers in open water. Its hydrodynamic structure suggests it could move at speeds comparable to today's fastest sharks, possibly exceeding 30 kilometers per hour. Unlike the Mosasaurus, its teeth weren't made for crushing, but for cutting. That defined its strategy. It didn't need a direct impact. It needed the exact moment. Both shared the same environment and competed for similar prey: large fish, cephalopods, and other marine reptiles. That placed them on inevitable intersecting paths. But the Cretoxyrhina didn't depend on confrontation. It depended on opportunity. There are fossils that prove this shark was capable of attacking large animals. Its teeth, sharp and curved, could cause deep wounds, even to organisms with tough structures. That opens up a possibility. In an ocean shared with the Mosasaurus, an encounter was not improbable, not as a direct face-off, but as a specific opportunistic event. An individual injured after a hunt, a movement slower than usual. Under those kinds of conditions, size ceased to be decisive, because in the open water, what you don't see coming can't always be avoided. But danger wasn't always in the open sea. There were areas where the water became denser, murkier, and control of the ocean ceased to matter. Because near the coast, the water no longer belonged to it. In areas where the ocean mixed with rivers and estuaries, visibility dropped. The bottom became uneven, and movements became harder to anticipate. There, the rules changed. It was an environment where the Mosasaurus lost part of its advantage, and where other predators dominated. One of them was the Deinosuchus, a giant crocodile that could exceed 10 meters in length with a heavy body adapted to remain motionless under the water for long periods. Unlike the Mosasaurus, it didn't chase. It waited. Its strategy didn't depend on speed in open fields, but on the environment. Shallow waters, slow currents, areas where visibility was limited. There, it had the upper hand. There is fossil evidence showing that Deinosuchus was capable of attacking large animals, including land dinosaurs that approached the water. It wasn't limited to small prey. It could face large targets, if the conditions were right. And that was the critical point. In a scenario where a Mosasaurus ventured too close to the coast, whether chasing food or moving between zones, it entered a space it didn't control. And in that kind of environment, the attack didn't come from a distance. It came from below. Without warning, a single movement was enough to close the distance. And once contact occurred, the force of the bite defined the outcome. There is no direct evidence of confrontations between the two. But in ecosystems where territories overlap, the risk never disappears. It just changes form. Because in those murky waters, it wasn't always about who the dominant predator was, but about who was waiting first. But not everyone waited. Some could face it directly. In the open ocean, where there was no shelter or cover, the advantage usually depended on speed, size, and reaction time. And there, the Mosasaurus wasn't alone. There were other predators designed for the exact same type of hunting. One of them was the Tylosaurus. It could reach between 12 and 14 meters in length, with an elongated and muscular body adapted for fast and sustained movement in open waters. Its structure didn't differ much, and that was precisely what made it a problem, because it wasn't an occasional threat, but direct competition. Both hunted similar prey, large fish, cephalopods, and even other marine reptiles. That meant that sooner or later, their paths crossed. And when that happened, the situation changed completely. Here there was no surprise. There was no ambush, just distance, closing rapidly. If one detected movement in its hunting zone, it responded. It was an automatic behavior, but against something of a similar size and capability. That reaction no longer guaranteed an advantage. An approach too direct could turn into a mistake. A late turn into an exposure. In those kinds of encounters, everything happened in seconds. The angle of the first move, the speed of reaction, the position of the body at the exact moment. That was what defined the result. Because unlike other enemies, the Tylosaurus didn't need to wait for an opportunity. It could create it. And when two predators designed to kill crossed paths in the same space, the ocean stopped being a shared territory and turned into a flashpoint of conflict. But the greatest danger didn't always come from another species. In the same ocean where the Mosasaurus dominated, there was something even more unpredictable than any other predator. It didn't move differently, it didn't hunt differently, and it didn't need to adapt, because it was the exact same thing. Other mosasaurs, animals from the same group with similar structures, comparable sizes, and nearly identical strategies. That meant one thing. There was no clear advantage, no predictable behavior. Just coincidences, And in those kinds of encounters, the difference wasn't always obvious. Fossils of Mosasaurus show bite marks from other individuals of their own group, indicating aggressive interactions between them. It wasn't just about competition. In some cases, it was an outright attack. Because in an environment where resources could become scarce, any individual that was smaller, injured, or at a disadvantage could become a target, not out of constant necessity, but out of opportunity. A Mosasaurus didn't need to distinguish between species if the result was the same. Movement, weakness, distance. That was enough. And in that context, the biggest threat wasn't a different predator, but one that thought exactly the same way, that reacted the same way, and that didn't hesitate. Because when two animals designed for the exact same purpose cross paths, the line between competitor and prey can completely disappear. But not all danger could be seen. Some threats didn't appear until it was already too late. In certain areas of the Cretaceous Ocean, the light began to fade. It wasn't the abyss, but it wasn't the surface either. Visibility dropped. Movements became harder to interpret. And in that kind of environment, the advantage shifted. The Mosasaurus remained a dominant predator, but it depended on detecting and reacting. And that wasn't always enough. One of the animals that inhabited these zones was the Tusoteuthis, a giant cephalopod that could reach up to 10 meters in total length, including its tentacles. Unlike other predators, it didn't use a charge to launch an attack. It used contact. Its tentacles, equipped with suckers and gripping structures, allowed it to hold on before its target could react completely. It didn't need straight-line speed. It needed closeness. In waters where visibility was limited, that difference became critical. A Mosasaurus descending in search of food or crossing areas deeper than usual could enter an environment where detection came too late. And in that kind of situation, the first point of contact wasn't always visible. It could come from below or from an angle that wasn't being monitored. There is no direct evidence of confrontations between the two, but we do know they shared the same ecosystem, and that the Tusoteuthis was adapted to interact with large prey. In that environment, it wasn't about who attacked first, but about who managed to detect the other in time. Because when visibility disappears, reaction stops being immediate. And in that window, even the dominant predator can lose its edge. But not even that was what brought about its end. Because the real danger didn't come from the ocean. For millions of years, the Mosasaurus survived all kinds of threats. Faster predators, rivals of its own caliber, ambushes, mistakes. None of that was enough. Because the end didn't come from the ocean, it came from the sky. Approximately 66 million years ago, a massive asteroid impacted Earth, releasing enough energy to alter the planet on a global scale. The impact generated massive fires, tsunamis, and a cloud of dust and particles that choked the atmosphere. Sunlight faded, temperatures shifted, and food production in the oceans collapsed. Food chains began to break from their very base. And in a matter of time, the apex predators ran out of prey. The Mosasaurus wasn't defeated in combat. It wasn't outperformed by another predator. Simply, it no longer had a world where it could survive. And in that scenario, size didn't matter, strength didn't matter, speed didn't matter. Because when the environment disappears, even the most dominant predator disappears with it. But the story doesn't end here. If you want to see even more extreme confrontations, that video is right here.